Okay, in this video we're going to be solving rational equations, and we have two different methods here. The first one is if we are dealing with proportions. We're going to solve it this way. We can condense into a proportion, then solve by cross multiplying. And then their second method is using an LCD, where we're going to get rid of all of our fractions by multiplying through by a least common denominator. So let's start out with our proportions and make sure we remember how to solve them. To get rid of division by 4 on the right side, we're going to go to our left side of our equation and we're going to multiply everything by 4. To get rid of division by 10 on the left side, we're going to go to the right side and we're going to multiply everything by 10. As we distribute, we now have 4v minus 16 equals 10v plus 30, so we have completely removed all of our division, all of our fraction bars. Now it's just a basic linear equation. We're going to move our v's to the same side, subtract 4v, move the 30 by subtracting 30. We now have negative 46 is equal to 6v. When we divide by 6, mark out the 6, we can reduce our resulting equation, divide top and bottom by 2, gives me a negative 23 over 3, final answer. Okay, number 2. Same thing, we're going to move our 4 by multiplying by 4. We're going to move our 2t minus 1, make sure we leave it in parentheses by multiplying by 2t minus 1. We now have 4t plus 8 is equal to 10t minus 5. Let's move all of our t's to the same side. Subtract 4t, you now have 6t on the right side. Add 5, you now have 13. To get rid of the 6, we are now going to divide by 6, and we have t is 13 over 6, and we can leave our answer like that. Okay, number 3. A little bit more difficult because here, to get rid of the d minus 2, we've got to come up here and multiply by d minus 2. Since it's already a d minus 2, we can actually just write that as squared. To get rid of the 7, we're going to come up here and multiply by 7. So we have d minus 2 times d minus 2. I'm going to come over here to the side and let's distribute that out. It'll be d times both of them will be d squared minus 2d. Negative 2 times both will be negative 2d plus 4. So that gives me d squared minus 4d plus 4. 7 times my 7 was equal to 49. Now, since our resulting problem here is a quadratic equation, now we have to use our quadratic steps. How do we solve this? Well, first off, we got to move our 49 over. We now have d squared minus 4d. When we subtract 49 from 4, it gives me a negative 45 is equal to 0. And then we just solve by factoring. Again, you could use factoring. You could use completing the square. You can use quadratic formula. However, factoring is going to be our easiest method. Adds to give you negative 4, multiplies to give you negative 45 is a negative 9 and a positive 5. Set each of them equal to 0, and you'll get d is equal to 9, or d is equal to negative 5. Number 4 is very similar. To get rid of b plus 6, we're going to come up here and multiply by b plus 6. To get rid of 2, we're going to come up here and multiply by 2. So then we'll have 2b minus 5 when we had to multiply that by the b plus 6 equals, to move the 2 up here, we're going to have 2 times 4b minus 1. So we're going to have to FOIL on one side, distribute on the other. When you FOIL this, 2b times both gives you 2b squared plus 12b. Multiply both by negative 5 gives you negative 5b minus 30 equals 8b minus 2 on the other side. Since it is quadratic, everything needs moved to the same side. So I'm going to have plus 7b when I combine my like terms there equals 8b minus 2. Let's move that 8b and the minus 2 over. So let's do minus 8b and plus 2. Mark them out. Gives you 2b squared minus 1b minus 28 is equal to 0. Since there's a 2 out front that cannot be factored out, we're going to have to use our slip and slide method here. So let's come up top here, change to a different color. And I have, when I move my 2 to the end, that's b squared minus b minus 56. Factor as usual. B and b, that's a negative 8 and a positive 7. You slip the number 2, so now let's divide by it. And that would give you a b minus 4 times, this will not reduce or divide, so slide the 2 back to the front, 2b plus 7. So there, now our equation is b minus 4 times 2b plus 7 is equal to 0. Set each of them equal to 0, and you'll get that b is equal to 4, or b is equal to negative 7 halves. Okay, number 5. Number 5 is now a little bit different, and we have, again, 2 different methods, and we'll show you both methods here for solving these. Method number 1 is you can turn this into a proportion, and proportions we've been solving. The way that we can get a proportion, I need a fraction that is equal to a fraction. Now, I'm fine on the right side. However, the left side, we don't have just one fraction. We have a difference. So what we can do is we can come over to the side and say, okay, 1/10 minus 2/5, common denominator, multiply top and bottom by 2 gives me 4/10, and that would be negative 3/10. So now what I can do is say that negative 3/10 is equal to p minus 5 over 5p, and we can solve this thing like a proportion. Move our 5p to the top by multiplying, that'd be negative 15p now. Move your 10 to the top by multiplying, that would be 10p minus 50, and we can solve it like a proportion. Let's move our 10p over by subtracting. We now have negative 25p is equal to negative 50. Divide by 25, and it gives you that p is equal to 2. Now, word of advice, though, go back to your original problem. Anytime you're dealing with rational equations, and we should have done it on these other ones as well, we have to make sure that we are not dividing by 0. So any variables that we have on the bottom, make sure that you can plug this back in for those variables, and make sure you don't have divided by 0. Make sure that none of those bottoms are going to 0, so that we're not got that problem. Okay, number 6. Now, number 6, we're going to try our other method. We're going to multiply everything through by a least common multiple, or a least common denominator. So let's see what is our common denominator for 4y, 4, and 2y. Again, it's what can I change? Let me put LCD. We'll do least common denominator. What can I change all these bottoms to? I have a 4y, a 4, which I could very easily multiply top and bottom by y to get. A 2y, which I could very easily multiply top and bottom by 2 to get. So my least common denominator, I could change all those bottoms into 4y. So what we're going to do is we're going to take in all 3 of our terms. We have 3 fractions, and we're going to multiply the entire thing. I'm going to put in parentheses around it. We're going to multiply everything by 4y. And let's see what happens. We should be able to, if we do this correctly, we should be able to cancel every one of our denominators. And let's see. When I take my first term and I multiply by 4y, the 4y and the 4y cancel completely, and it only leaves me with the top, y plus 1. Bring down your equal sign. When you take your second term and you multiply it by 4y, the 4 and the 4 cancels, but it leaves you with a y. So you're left with a 1, and you're left with a y here, so you're left with 1y. Plus, let me erase it so I can cancel it with the third one as well. When you multiply the third term by 4y, the y cancels with y. The 2 and 4 reduce and leaves you with a 2 and a 1, so you're left with only the 2. So you're left with a y minus 2 on top and a 2 on the outside, so a 2 and a y minus 2. So notice that you have absolutely no more denominators. And that should always happen if done correctly. So here the parentheses are not necessary. 1y can be written as just y, plus, let's distribute 2y minus 4. Combine your like terms, gives me y plus 1 equals y plus 2y is 3y. You have minus 4. Let's move our y over by subtracting. That gives you 2y. Move minus 4 over by adding equals 5. And when you divide by 2, you get that y is equal to 5 halves. Again, you need to check and make sure your denominators, is 5 halves a legal answer? If you were to plug in 5 halves here or here, do you ever have division by 0? And you do not, so therefore 5 halves is fine. Number 7. Let's go back and we'll flip-flop back and forth. Let's use our other method again. Common denominators, let's combine this into a single fraction. And you already have a single fraction over here, so let's try to create a proportion. So to combine this, it's going to be pretty easy. We just need to multiply top and bottom by 2, and we have common denominators. So that would be r minus 3 over 6r squared. And when you multiply top and bottom by 2, that would be 2 over 6r squared. So that gives you r minus 3 plus 2 over 6r squared, which is r minus 1 over 6r squared is equal to 5 over 2r. Okay, when we solve this, now we can solve it like a proportion. We're going to move our 2r up here, and we're going to do so by multiplying. So that would be 2r squared minus 2r equals, we're going to move our 6r squared up here by multiplying, and that would be 30r squared. Let's combine our like terms. Let's move everything to the right side. So we're going to subtract 2r squared, and we're going to move our minus 2r over by adding 2r, and that gives me 28r squared plus 2r is equal to 0. We now factor this, and that gives me 2r times parentheses 14r plus 1 is equal to 0. Set each factor equal to 0 and solve it, and you'll get that r is equal to 0 or r is equal to negative 1/14. And there are your two answers. However, go back to your original and make sure that both of those answers are legal. If you were to plug in a 0 here, you have 2 times 0 on bottom, which is 0. You cannot divide by 0, so r equals 0 is not a legal answer. When you plug in negative 1/14, you're fine. You won't get zeros on either one of those bottoms. So 1/14, negative 1/14 works. 0 does not work. Okay, number 8, we'll use our other method. We're going to multiply everything by our least common denominator. All three of these denominators could very easily be changed into 6k squared. So let's multiply everything by 6k squared. When you multiply your first term by 6k squared, 6 cancels with 6 and leaves you with the k squared. So you're left with a 1 on top and a k squared on the outside. Plus, multiplying your second term by 6k squared, the whole thing cancels and leaves you with just the top, k squared plus 9k plus 20 equals, when you multiply your third term by 6k squared, the whole thing cancels again and leaves you with 2k squared plus 11k plus 15. Let's combine all of our like terms. On the left side gives you 2k squared plus 9k plus 20. The right side you have 2k squared plus 11k plus 15. When you move your terms over, we're going to subtract our 2k squared. We're going to subtract 11k's. And we're going to subtract 15. And you get, these cancel, gives you negative 2k plus 5 is equal to nothing. Let's move our 5 over. You now have negative 2k is negative 5, and when you divide by negative 2, you can leave your answer. Let me write that better. You can leave your answer as negative divided by negative is a positive, so you could leave it as 5 halves, or you could change it to a decimal, which would be 2.5. Again, go back and check, and as long as k was not 0, 6 times 0 would give you 0, so 2.5 will be fine. Number 9. Okay, number 9 will work with proportions. So to solve this with a proportion, we're going to have to combine these two. So before we combine them, we're going to have to find a common denominator. So let's do 1 over m squared minus m. I'm going to factor that so that we can find a common denominator. We've got to add that to 1 over m minus 1, which is very easy to find a common denominator now. We just need an m here. So we're going to multiply top and bottom by m. And we now have on top 1 plus m, which I'm going to write as m plus 1, over m parentheses m minus 1. So that's going to be our first two terms combined into that. And that's equal to our second term now. And the bottom there, if you would like to factor that as well, you can. I'm going to leave it as m squared minus m now, just to where it's easier to multiply by. However, you know what? No. let's go ahead and, because I think our problem is going to be a little bit easier if we leave it like that. Now to get rid of that, we're going to have to multiply it by the top, but let's not actually multiply. Let's leave it as m times m minus 1 times m plus 1. And when you move this to the other side, you now have 6 times m minus 1. Okay, now I'm going to show you a trick because we have, this is not a normal linear equation, so I'm going to move everything to the same side. And I'm going to show you a trick that you can actually use throughout this course. This might pop up a few times. So this whole term comes over and becomes a minus 6m times m minus 1. Okay, you now have two terms, and if you remember factoring by grouping, I would actually pull both of these terms have an m minus 1 out, and to save you from having to multiply all this out, I would do that. I would pull out an m minus 1. You're left with an m and an m plus 1 in the first one, and a negative 6m in the second term, and that's equal to 0. And that's just going to make things a little bit easier because now I can clean this up. I have m minus 1. Distribute the m to m plus 1. That'd be m squared plus m, and then you have your minus 6m. Combine any like terms. You now have m minus 1 times m squared minus 5m. You can factor the m out of that, and you end up with m minus 1 times m minus 5 is equal to 0. And when you set all three of those terms equal to 0, you get m is either 1, m is 0, or m is 5. However, let's check to make sure that m can be 1, 0, and 5. If you were to plug in to your original, m equals 1 right here. You get 1 minus 1, which would be 0. That was not legal. If you were to plug in 0 into this term, 0 squared minus 0, you would end up with 0, so that is not legal. So m minus 5 is going to be your only answer to this problem. Okay, I want to work this problem the other way as well, just to show you that sometimes one method is going to be better than the other. So let's factor this so we can find our least common denominator, so we'll know what to multiply all of our terms by. 6 over m parentheses m minus 1. I could very easily change every one of my denominators to an m times m minus 1. So let's take every term and multiply by m times m minus 1. When I multiply my first term by m times m minus 1, the whole bottom cancels with the whole top and leaves me with 1. When I multiply my second term, my m minus 1s will cancel and leaves me with a 1 and just the m, so plus, bring down the plus, m. When I multiply my third term, the m times m minus 1s, everything cancels and leaves me with equals 6. And look what you have. 1 plus m is equal to 6. When you solve it, you get that m is equal to 5. Which is the only answer. So the more you work of these, the more you're going to see, okay, which method should I use? Which one's going to be the best? Which one's going to be the easiest? Like with this next one, more than likely, the proportions method is going to be a whole lot easier because you've already got common denominators. However, you could very easily also multiply everything by 5x plus 1. So if we do that, let's see what we get. So 5x plus 1 is obviously our least common denominator. Multiply it by your first term, you're left with just the 3 because the 5x plus 1s will cancel. Minus, here the 5x plus 1s cancel. Make sure you put the x plus 1 in parentheses because this minus is times all of it. Equals, when you multiply the 1 times 5x plus 1, you get 5x plus 1. So now let's get rid of our parentheses by distributing the negative 1. That'd be negative x minus 1 equals 5x plus 1. Combine like terms, you have negative x plus 2. When you combine 3 and minus 1 equals 5x plus 1. Move your x's to the same side. Moving minus x gives you plus x, so that's 6x now. Subtracting 1 gives you 1. Divide by 6 gives you x equals 1/6. So probably both methods there would have been fairly easy to have used. Number 11, we're going to finish these out just by multiplying by the least common denominator. So your least common denominator here between 2s and 2s would be 2s. So we're going to multiply every term by 2s. Here the 2 cancels with the 2 and leaves you with just the s. So you have now one s. Bring down the equal sign. Here the s's would cancel and leaves you with just a 2 here and a 2 out here. They're being multiplied, so that'd be 4. Here the whole bottom, bring down the minus, and the whole top cancels. Now here's an issue. There are, since you have a fraction bar, again, implied parentheses around this. So make sure that this s squared minus 2s minus 8 stays in parentheses so that when you do minus, you don't lose a sign. So now you have s is equal to 4 minus s squared plus 2s and a plus 8. Everything gets moved to the same side, so I'm going to take my equal sign. I'm moving everything to the left side, so minus s squared becomes positive s squared. When you take s and you subtract 2s, that gives you a minus s. And then 4 and 8 was 12. When you move it to the other side, you get minus 12. Factor, since it's quadratic, and you get s times s gives you s squared, adds to give you negative 1, multiplies to give you negative 12, would be a negative 4 and a positive 3. Set each equal to 0, and you get positive 4 and negative 3. We do always want to check for extraneous values, so just make sure that 4 and negative 3 can be plugged back into the original, and both of them will be fine. Okay, number 12, common denominator between 1, w, and w. The least common denominator that we're going to multiply is w. We're taking every term and multiplying by w. In our first term, nothing cancels because you have a 1 on bottom, so that's not going to cancel with the top, so you're left with a w here and a w on the outside. That'll be a w squared. Bring down the equals. Here the w cancels with the w and leaves you with just the top, which is 1. Minus, here the w and w cancels and leaves you with a top again. And again, you have implied parentheses, which you cannot forget. 2w squared minus 10w plus 8. Clean this up, will be w squared equals 1 minus 2w squared plus 10w minus 8. Let's move all our w's to the left side, or actually move everything to the left side. Minus 2w's squares turns into plus 2, and we're going to combine it with these. So that gives you 3w squareds. Plus 10w turns into minus 10w. The positive 1 and negative 8, I should have combined them before I moved them, but that's going to be a negative 7. So when I move it over, you get a positive 7. So here's what you now have. This is a slip and slide problem. So let's factor. Move the 3 to the end, gives you w squared minus 10w plus 21. Factor as normal. W and w adds, multiplies as a negative 7, negative 3. Since you slipped the 3, let's now divide by it. You cannot divide or reduce, so let's move this 3 to the top. It'll be 3w minus 7. And w minus 3 divided by 3 would be 1. So therefore, this factors into 3w minus 7 times w minus 1 is equal to 0. Set each of these equal to 0, and you get w is equal to 7/3 and w is equal to 1. Let's check both to make sure that they are okay, and since you're just plugging into w on the bottoms, both of them will be fine. Number 13. Or you can find a common denominator, you do have to factor. So let's do 1 over z minus 5 is already factored. I'm going to put it in parentheses to group it. Here I have 1 over 2 sets of parentheses, z and z, adds to give me negative 7, multiplies to give me 10, will be a negative 5 and a negative 2. Minus, here I have a 1 over 2. Now there is no relationship between z minus 2 and the 2, okay? So that also has to be part of your common denominator. So our least common denominator is going to be, it's going to have a z minus 5. It's going to have a z minus 2. And it's also going to have a regular 2. So I'm going to have to put a 2 out front there. So there's my least common denominator. Let's multiply every term by that to get rid of our fractions. So we have 2 z minus 5 and z minus 2 over 1. That's what we're multiplying by. In my first term, z minus 5s are gone. And it leaves you with the 1 that's on top, which you only have to put, and a 2 and a z minus 2 on the outside. Bring down the equal sign. In my second term, z minus 5 and z minus 2 cancel and leaves me with just the 1 and the 2, and 1 times 2 is 2. In my third term, bring down the minus. The 2's cancel and leaves you with z minus 5 and z minus 2. And remember, this minus is minus that whole thing once you distribute it out, so you got to be careful there. Here we distribute, that'd be 2z minus 4 equals 2 minus, implied parentheses. Distribute this, I'm just going to go ahead and do the whole thing, combine like terms as I do it. That'd be z squared minus 7z plus 10. I do have to distribute that minus, so that'd be 2z minus 4 equals 2. That'd be a negative z squared, a positive 7z, and a minus 10. Let's move everything to the same side, and here's how I decide which side to move it to. If I ever see a negative z squared, I always like to have my z squareds positive, so I'll move those wherever it takes to make it positive. So negative z squared comes to the, well, let's combine some like terms just to make this look better first. 2z minus 4 equals, that'd be negative z squared, a positive 7z, and 2 and minus 10 gives you negative 8. Now everything comes to the left side, so negative z squared becomes a positive z squared. When you move the plus 7 by subtracting 7, that gives you 2 minus 7, which is negative 5. When you move minus 8 by adding 8 to negative 4, that would give you a positive 4. And nothing's left on the right side, so put your 0. We factor, set it equal to 0. Z times z is z squared. Negative 4 times negative 1 gives you a positive 4, adds to give you negative 5. So your two answers are 4, 1, and you can check it, but both will be fine. And the last one. Let's factor to see what our common denominator is. On the bottom, let's pull a u out. You're left with u squared plus 1. Or actually, let's pull a u squared out, and you're left with u plus 1. Minus 1 over, this is already factored, so let's put it in some parentheses, u plus 1 equals 3 over u squared. So the bottoms I could very easily, least common denominator, turn into u squared times u plus 1. Again, all you would need here is to multiply top and bottom by u squared, multiply top and bottom here by u plus 1, so there's your common denominator. So let's multiply everything by that, u squared times u plus 1 over 1. When you do it to the first term, u squares and u plus 1s cancel. Everything cancels and leaves you with just the 1 on top. When you do it to the second term, u plus 1 cancels and leaves you with minus the 1 on top and just a u squared. You don't have to put parentheses because that's the only term. When you multiply the third term by your common denominator, u squares cancel and leaves you with the 3 and the u plus 1. So there's your equation. We're going to have 1 minus u squared equals 3u plus 3. Let's move all of our stuff to the same side. Since u squared is negative, let's move everything to the right side. That'll be a positive u squared, a positive 3u, and when you move the plus 1 over by subtracting, that'd give you plus 2. Factor. U times u gives you u squared, a positive 1 and a positive 2 multiplies give you 2, adds to give you 3, so therefore your two answers are going to be negative 1 and a negative 2. And you can try to plug those in to your original, and you've got a problem. If you look right here, if you were to try to plug in a negative 1 here, negative 1 plus 1, that would give you a 0. So therefore, we have to throw out that answer. Negative 2, plugging it in should be fine.